Hi everyone, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Wednesday morning. Welcome to my YouTube channel as we take a look at two storms that we're watching at the moment. For those of you who come here on a regular basis, welcome back. For those of you who are new to my YouTube channel, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Please participate in the conversation as I always get involved in it in one form or another. And if you'd like, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and you'll get notifications when new videos come out. Usually do at least one video a day. Now, we're going to cover a lot today. We have two storms. The first one is the one that's going to be affecting the parts of the northern Rockies and then into the plains and eventually into the upper Midwest. And in the blue shading you see here, these are winter storm watches that have been posted. The surface lows are plotted here for you. There's a stationary front here with a series of weak waves on it. It's probably overdrawn here by the automated system that does this. There's just really one low that is sitting somewhere in southeastern Minnesota. This is the lead system that is moving out and is not the system that is going to be causing any issues. That system, as we look on the satellite view, is now coming into the west, and you can see the clouds here that are organizing. There's a upper air disturbance right there, that little twist there. That's the upper air feature that we're watching as it moves inland and eventually races northeastward. That's going to form the system that we're talking about. The other system we're watching is this big swirl that's out in the Pacific Ocean and is still a few days away from California. This is going to be another storm that's going to move inland in central California near San Francisco. That's going to bring another round of heavy rains and heavy snows up and down the pretty much the entire state. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. I want to do the first system first, and that is the one that's going to be we'll call it the little snowstorm that's going to go through the plains and into the upper Midwest. Might even be some blizzard conditions with that. Now, when we look at the NAM, one of the things that I've noticed is with this disturbance coming in, and you can see it here. This is for late this afternoon as it's right on the California coast, and it amplifies as it moves into the Rockies. You see how it closes off there. That is a sign that we're seeing some strength here. This is a pretty strong little system, and you have a deep trough that continues in the west. You have a ridge here building ahead of it in the east. So you have that displacement going on aloft of warm and cold air in the jet, where part of it drops down, the other part of it rises up. The trough drops it down, the ridge brings it up. And there'll be a surface low from this that will track something along the lines of what I've just drawn in with that arrow. I might be a little bit too far south with that. You know, that's one of the struggles with all of this when you're forecasting for snow. It's inevitable that you're going to bust a snow forecast someplace. That's just the way it works because of the fact that you're never going to get the exact southern edge of all this. So, or the northern edge for that matter. You'll get the part in the middle correct, but you won't get you're going to miss the northern and southern stream to some degree. That's always the toughest part of the forecast. And there has been a tendency for the models to track further north in the west this year, and even in the east too to some degree. But here's how it looks at the surface on the new NAM, which we have out to Thursday night. And there's your low, fairly deep here, 989 pressure low in the northwestern Kansas, and you can see the area of snow in Nebraska, southern parts of South Dakota, and Wyoming. And then that low moves into northeastern Kansas, and the snows spread into southern Minnesota. The darker blues, the heavier snows shown in just right there into northeastern Nebraska, though it's rain in the northeastern corner of the state, and into northwestern Iowa, at least initially, and it's snow up to the north. I'm going to back up one model run so that we can take it out a little further, and you'll see how this all translates. So eventually the low winds up in Iowa. Cold air wraps around behind it. You know, it's probable that there's going to be some near blizzard conditions for a few places in that stream where we have the winter storm watch up. And then the low translates to the east, and we'll get to the East Coast weather in a second. But this is for Saturday afternoon, and there's a line of thunderstorms that forms with the cold front, and that's going to be impacting the Northeast. I think some of those thunderstorms could be on the strong side. We also have this little Gulf low that's off the Florida coast that's going to eventually get involved in all this. So how much snow is going to fall? Well, let's see what the model has, and we'll put it up on a tight map so you can take a view. This is the NAM, the North American model. And he'll put the total snowfall on for you. And you can see it really, the NAM is very aggressive here with snow amounts, up to 2 feet in some places in parts of South Dakota and into southwestern Minnesota. You can see where the 4-inch line runs up into northeastern Kansas, into extreme northwestern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and then crosses northwestern Wisconsin into the upper peninsula of Michigan. So that's a pretty good sized snowstorm for that particular part of the country. And if we want to just compare it to the GFS to see what that model did, and same idea. It does have some aggressive amounts, though it wants to do it a little bit further to the east, probably wanting to emphasize that there's a little bit of colder air, that slightly colder look to it. We'll put the surface on the GFS and take a look by comparison, and then we'll scroll it back so you can get a look at this. And it does have a tendency to want to make it a little bit colder on the northern edge, and you can see it there. Also, you can see the northern cutoff of the snow. It doesn't really get all the way up into northern Minnesota. Has it the range snow line a little further south into Wisconsin, and then it moves on out to the east from there. So this is going to be the first system that we're going to be watching over the next 2 days. And now we'll go back to the system for California, because this is going to be very, very important for the state, considering how it was described in some of the things I've read, is how dire it is in some of the areas in north central California, because the dams are absolutely filled to capacity, and some of them have overflowed. They can't really stand another round of rain of several inches. But here's that low, and it's been dropping southward. And what it's going to probably do is do something like this as it heads towards the California coast. It looks like the models want to zero in on the actual surface low going into near San Francisco. But this is all part of the signature of what's been going on in the West, because we've had this deep trough that just continues to take these systems in the Pacific and just ride them along in the flow and bring them right in to the West Coast. It's been one after another, and that pattern may or may not change going forward. We'll see. There's some differences in the models longer term, and I think the long term is going to hinge on whether another trough wants to drop into the West, or whether the possibility that perhaps maybe this might be the last one for a little while. So we'll see how that goes. So here's the California system here as it moves in. You see it right there. That drop southward is important, because now it has it displaced down south of 40 degrees north, and it's got a pretty wrapped up low that comes in just south of San Francisco. And you notice that once again in this instance that rain gets extended all the way down. We're going to have another one of these, just like the one last week, where we have this deep feeder of tropical moisture that comes in and brings in heavy rains into southwestern California. And of course, you've got the rains and heavy snows up for northern California as well. And this is going to move inland. Eventually, it produces some widespread snows up in the central Rockies, so not quite into Colorado, as another low winds up developing in eastern Colorado as we go into next week. So why don't we take a look now at what the long term has to say, because there are some differences in the models going forward. I'm going to start with the European model from last night. And one of the things that the European model has been doing is that it still wants to drop another trough out in the west later in the period. So we'll back it up. and bring it up to real time. So this is today, and there's that system that comes out into the Midwest. Here's our California system that's getting ready out in the ocean, and there you have that trough. You can see how it really just wraps up. You have the low closing off aloft Sunday night as that surface low heads to the coast, and not as strong as the one from last week, but it won't matter because even if it produces half of what the other one did, it's going to be really problematic. And I think it may produce more than half. It may produce about 3/4 of what the other one did, and that's just not going to be good. Now that trough moves inland. We have another ridge that tries to pop up in the east, and next week it's not as strong as the one we have now, and that's going to bring another cold front through. Now here's where the European and the GFS and the Canadian differ, is at this point, because the European has another trough right there that is going to want to drop down into the western states, and that's going to want to bring the ridge up again in the east to some degree. Now, I will say that the European last night, unlike yesterday, doesn't drop the trough as far south. So it keeps the ridge in the east a little flatter. Okay, instead of having it pop up, it's just flat. The lead system goes out, and then you have this one that's swinging around. So it has a different look to it. The longer range GFS is a bit different, and it has implications for the longer term in the east. It has no trough in the west. It has actually tries to start to build a ridge out in the west, which would mean a big break for California for a while, because everything then the jet is displaced further to the north, and you do have a colder flow into the east. But there's some questions again. Is that trough going to be like this? Are you going to have more of a ridge here developing in the western part of the United States? And the GFS wants to actually develop troughiness in the east as we go through the period where it suddenly brings up a ridge along the west coast, and you have some semblance of a polar flow coming back into the United States later next week and toward next weekend. A lot of questions here. For me, the fact is that the trough in the west has been so persistent for so long that until you see something that really monumentally breaks it, you have to just kind of go with persistence. So I would lean to the Europeans' idea a little heavier than I would on the GFS. But again, the European has trended now to try to be a little less aggressive with that trough. So it'll be interesting to see what it does later today when it comes out. Now let's look at what we think is going to happen in the eastern part of the United States, because there are two things going on. First off, as we back away, we've got this low. Here's this lead system that's coming out of the Midwest now that's running northeastward. That creates a warm front that's trying to move through here, and we're going to struggle a little bit with it today because we're going to have to wait for this. There's still a little bit of a marine influence going on, but that is going to gradually go to a west-southwest flow. So eventually, that's going to allow for some drying. The marine layer is cut off, and this should set us up for near record highs on Thursday, provided we get enough sunshine. The problem for Friday is that we have this low here off the east coast, east of Florida. Here's your Midwest snowstorm. So the marine flow comes back in. The surface winds, remember, they're clockwise around highs and counterclockwise around lows. So, you know, your wind here is more southeast or south in this area here, as opposed to where it would be for Thursday, where it's more west-southwest. And then, of course, you've got the warm front here that's setting up from the storm in the Midwest. And that is going to make for the possibility of some showers and thunderstorms here on Saturday. It brings a front through. That Gulf low moisture kind of gets lifted up and absorbed by all this, but you have a lead weather front here that's moving through, and then there's a bit of a secondary front behind it. So I think there's a chance that there could be some strong thunderstorms ahead of this front before it moves on through, especially away from the coast. This time of year and through much of the spring, thunderstorms tend to die out when they reach the coastline. So areas like Long Island and eastern Connecticut and southeastern New England, oftentimes these thunderstorms fall apart. The one difference here is that we do have support with this cold front to some degree. So there's some dynamic support aloft that sometimes can compensate compensate the destruction that the marine layer causes at the bottom of the atmosphere. What happens is the very cold ocean at 40, that air gets involved in the bottom part of the atmosphere, and that disrupts the development of thunderstorms. Thunderstorms like warm tropical air, and when you have that marine air getting involved, it cools that whole part of the bottom of the atmosphere down, and it gets entrained as that air is drawn up, and those thunderstorms just die. So that is not the case inland, where the wind has a land trajectory, so that air is warmer. Now that front moves on through. We get some colder air, relatively speaking, and then we have a secondary front that moves through on Monday, actually produces a couple of rain showers and snow showers when that goes by. And then the California system now translates into another low that wants to run to the Great Lakes, but this one not as deep. So another warm front, cold front situation in the east. Probably see temperatures try to make a run back into the 60s again in the middle of next week before that front goes by. And then after that, because of the fact that the upper air is colder on the GFS, you start to get a series of cold fronts. Highs move out with cold air. Cold fronts and lows that are coming southeastward out of Canada bring through these fronts and keep the temperatures closer to seasonal. And the question is, if the upper air flow is far enough south and deep enough, one of these diving systems may wind up tracking far enough south that maybe you wind up with some snow here in the Northeast. Now, the model's done this a couple of times. Again, that all hinges on whether there's going to be a trough in the west. If there's a trough in the west, this ain't happening. Instead of getting lows that want to dive southeastward like this, you're going to have them go more like this or even this way, and that brings up warmer air in between weather systems. So there's a lot of doubt here in terms of what the model is trying to indicate. And then that goes out, and you can see there's another one behind it that's sort of weak. Again, at this stage of the game, when you're looking down into the second week of the long range, as I always say, it's really problematic to focus on the specifics of the model. It's just better to deal with the general trend of what's being shown. And I'll put the upper air over the United States here so you can take a look. We'll have it here. So you can see here the darker blues, that's colder air aloft, basically. The warmer air, now you see that ridge that builds up in the west. The ridge is now off the east coast instead of along it. So that's allowing weather systems to move along in the flow. And toward the end of the period, it actually gets rather chilly in the Northeast for a couple of days. Again, if the GFS is correct. And I'll show you, if we go back to last night's 240-hour or day 10 on the European, the difference, and you'll see it. And you see how look at the west and look at the east. So the European says, no, ridging in the east, some troughing in the west, and you pretty much have the same thing that what we've been experiencing. The GFS, on the other hand, has, as we switch over, you can see the difference. You see, it has a much different look. It has and the Canadian, by the way, is almost the same as the GFS. The GFS has the ridge building into the west, which allows for more of a northwest flow and a colder flow coming into the east. So going forward, that is really going to be what we're going to have to watch how models handle this. And here's the Canadian model. And the Canadian model is pretty much the same as the GFS. It does not drop that trough in the west, but has a colder northwest flow going into the eastern part of the United States at day 10. So the Canadian actually supports the GFS's model view. Why don't we just look back? The new NAM is out a little further now, since we're toward the end of the video. And we'll take a look at its impacts here. It's out to 60 hours, which brings us into Saturday. And we'll put it up the surface. Let me just get that for you. So here's the surface map for late this afternoon. You see that Gulf flow spinning away. And now here comes that storm in the Midwest. The model might be a shade colder on this run. Might match up better with the GFS, and you can see what's happening here in the east for Friday. You know, Thursday again, that west, the isobars are west-southwest, which will allow for some temperatures to move up at least into the 60s. There'll be a question of clouds. That'll be an issue as well. And then on Friday, it's back to more of a marine southeast flow. So I think Friday will wind up being a little bit cooler, but still warmer than normal. And then you have the setup now beginning with the storm out in the Midwest, and there's your cold front, and you've got this, you know, sort of snaking warm front that's developing. So you have a bit of a tropical inflow in there to support the view that we could see some showers and thunderstorms in the east here on Saturday, and that some of them could get rather strong. So we'll leave you with some air temperatures on the NAM, and here's, let me just back it up. So here's today, which is going to be problematic depending on clouds and the passing showers that we're getting through. So now it warms it up nicely tomorrow, but it doesn't bring it quite far north. So that's going to be something we'll watch. It might be because of clouds. It may also be underdone. And then it warms it up actually more on Friday for away from the coast at least, which would make sense where there's more of a south wind inland. Temperatures will climb up into the upper 60s to around 70 on Friday too. And here, this is Friday evening, where we've got these 60s going all the way up into southwestern New York, which is amazing. It does happen, you know, it happens every winter at least once or twice in my observation. There's nothing new that we're seeing, by the way. I know I get a lot of, you know, people, you know, saying that, oh my God, this is unbelievable. It never happened before. Yeah, it has happened before. Everything you've seen has happened before. Okay, it's just that social media has made weather front and center, whereas 20 or 30 years ago, something like this wouldn't even make the newspapers, and you wouldn't know about it unless you talked with a relative in that area. There was no widespread weather information the way it is now, so we're now much more cognizant of what goes on around the country. Look at the stream of above normal temperatures that we've been in pretty much since Sunday in the eastern part of the United States. It's just been amazing. Temperatures running 12 to 16 degrees or more above normal, in some cases more than 20 degrees above normal. And here we are for Friday with the entire area east of the Mississippi still well above normal. Okay, so we'll be watching these three storms for you. Have a great day. More weather posts and more information. I've got posts on meteorologistjoechaffee.com regarding the storm in California. I'll put one up later today. We'll talk about the storm in the Midwest, along with all the local weather for the Northeast and for the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley area. You can get specific forecasts on my app, so you can download that and subscribe to my forecast. That's just 99 cents a month. And if you've stayed 23 minutes into this video, congratulations. If you like my video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, absolutely free, and you'll get notifications when new videos come up. So everybody have a great Wednesday, stay safe, and we will talk to you tomorrow.